Welcome to RealGM Radio. I'm here with Keith Smith to talk about Luka Doncic's debut, Jimmy Butler in Golden State, and what teams we're watching this offseason after a wild trade deadline. Let's jump in. It's RealGM Radio. I'm Wes Goldberg here with Keith Smith of Spotrac, and the front office show. We're going to be talking about how the activity before the trade deadline impacts this upcoming offseason in a second. But first, we're recording this on a Tuesday, the day after Luka made his Lakers debut. The Lakers still have a lot of to figure out here in terms of fitting Luka and LeBron together. But Keith, what stood out to you in Luka's first game as a Laker?
Yeah, I mean, you saw immediately what he brings to the floor. Jackson Hayes, if he just plays defense, is going to feast off lobs from LeBron and Luka. He caught two of them in the first minute of the game from each of them. So he should be loving life right now in LA. And then I thought that one full court bomb that he threw to LeBron, that was it right there. I was like, yeah, this will be fine. They'll figure it out. They've got defensive issues. I wrote this morning about how this was a good debut team for them with the Jazz because they're not going to put a ton of pressure on you offensively. They're kind of one action and done kind of team, and they run some good stuff. But if you can defend the initial action, they're going to struggle. So let's see what they look like when they're playing against a better team with more offensive weapons. But for now, it kind of is what it is, and I think hey, let's take it as it comes, and it looked pretty good.
Yeah, I thought it looked about as good as you could probably expect, given the way that Luka plays, the way that LeBron plays. You definitely saw some clunkiness. LeBron trying to force it to Luka, Luka trying to force it to LeBron, a little bit more deferential. And then they started to kind of figure out, specifically LeBron, I thought he kind of figured it out as the game went on. And Luka's going to have to figure out his spots here. But you mentioned Jackson Hayes, man. He caught the first lob from LeBron, and then the second one from Luka. And Jackson Hayes is running down the court, and they do the zoom in on him, and he's just got the biggest smile. He's like literally laughing. He's like, "This is my life." It's like he's like the LeBron meme when in the pool. He's like, "I can't believe this is going to be my life now." So great for Jackson Hayes, I guess. And then Luka, his face also seeing LeBron streaking down the court, breaking out in another smile, and hitting that two-handed chest pass to him. I think offensively, you've got to be really excited for the potential there. I know that there's concerns with fit. There's all that stuff. Both of them are so high basketball IQ guys. And the thing with fit is, I think just ball handling and passing kind of mitigates a lot of fit issues. At the end of the day, if Luka and LeBron are driving and kicking, it's going to look all right. They'll figure it out. But the defensive stuff is the big concern. And not getting Mark Williams in there, obviously, is a blow. I don't know what else they can do in terms of maybe finding a center on the buyout or something like that over the next couple of days here. But it's going to be like Jackson Hayes is he the third most important Laker now? It's kind of weird when you think about it.
Yeah, he might be just because of the defensive role. They're going to need him to play. They really need him to offer the rim protection because they just don't have much else there. You've got other guys that can kind of masquerade as centers, like Dorian Finney-Smith, played a lot of the five with Brooklyn before he came over. Jared Vanderbilt is, offensively, he's a five, so you could probably play him at the five defensively against some teams too. But the issue is, if you break down that initial perimeter defense, there's just not much waiting for you at the rim. And teams are going to break down that initial perimeter defense a lot. There were times in this game, Isaiah Collier just put the ball on the deck and went wherever he wanted to go. Didn't always make the right read. Sometimes took tougher shots than he needed to. But you could kind of see, all right, when that's a better team, that's going to be really rough because LeBron doesn't bring it night to night defensively anymore.
Right.
Luka is not a good defender. I don't care how many highlight clip packages, Laker fans are now stealing from Mavs fans to try to make it look like Luka's a good defender. He's just not. And then Austin Reeves is a guy who I think Austin Reeves gives you really good effort, but he just gets picked on. Teams go at him. And those three guys are going to be on the floor a lot, especially in key, meaningful minutes. Then that's going to be tough. So that puts a lot on Jackson Hayes. I think that's why they love the idea of what Mark Williams could be for them. And they're going to be doing what they can. But, man, that buyout market is limited for big men. And, it's going to be just a lot of J.J. Redick having to scheme stuff and, do the best they can that way.
Austin Reeves had a great game in this debut. His job just got even easier than it was before. He had 22 points on 6 of 10 shooting. Hit a bunch of threes, had 9 rebounds, did some playmaking too. Like he's sort of that that third guard when one of Luka and LeBron comes out. Austin Reeves is able to kind of be that. So the Lakers are always going to basically have two guys who they trust running offense on the court at all times, which is, I don't know that there's another team in the league quite like that, where you have, I don't know if Austin Reeves is somewhere between a secondary ball handler and a primary ball handler, the way the Lakers have used him over the last year or two. I can't really think of another. The closest comparison I can make is maybe Brooklyn when they had Harden, Durant, and Kyrie. But even Durant doesn't really. He's not that kind of guy either in terms of a primary ball handler. He's more of a primary scorer, obviously. So I don't know. It's kind of funky watching them because they just always have a lot of ball handling. They have a luxury of ball handling, but then they're at a deficit almost everywhere else on the roster. It's a weird team.
Yeah, it definitely is. It's funny because I think maybe the team you would look at right now as most similar might be like the Sacramento Kings, because
Yeah.
with their new structure where they're kind of point guardless, they've got Malik Monk, DeMar DeRozan, Zach LaVine handling the ball a lot. Obviously, you run a ton of offense through Domantas Sabonis. So, you're in a place where, okay, maybe it's them. I think Boston at times gets there when they're running a lot through Tatum, Brown. Derek White is still, nominally the point guard at times. They'll run through Drew Holiday. But yeah, you're absolutely right. As far as three guys who are, high usage, drive and kick, set things up. Yeah, the Lakers have three of them. And that's, to some extent, that's great. The challenge comes in. You got to make sure you have enough shooting on the floor. And that shooting also needs to hold up defensively around those guys. And that's probably the biggest question marks that they have right now. But again, they'll figure it out. And I trust with LeBron and Luka and JJ Redick, maybe they'll just kind of say, all right, the way we're going to have to win is 120 to 115. And we're going to have to try to outscore teams. And, if that's the way they go, that's not the end of the world. I think, too, one last thing I'll say with the debut part of it, with the offense, they played pretty fast against the Jazz. I don't think that's going to be a regular thing. I think that was energy, excitement, hype, and all that stuff. LeBron doesn't like to play fast, has never really. LeBron gets this misnomer that he loves to push pace because he's like a freight train in transition, but that's like twice a game.
Right.
It doesn't happen all the time. And then Luka, I mean, he doesn't want to play fast at all. If he's playing fast, it's by hit ahead passes. So that's going to be another thing that we'll watch. So they're going to have to be extremely efficient to outscore teams because they're probably not going to play high possession games.
That's a great call, right? And I think they have the offensive personnel to be that efficient. Maybe that is how they keep the score down by playing slow, and then they just out efficient you in the offense. And you've got two of the most efficient offensive players that we've seen in a really long time in Luka and LeBron. Perhaps that's just what it is, but the shooting is going to be the key part of it. Is Dorian Finney-Smith making those threes out of the corner? Is Austin Reeves making his three-pointers now that he's going to be maybe more of a catch-and-shoot guy? And then what are they getting from this bench, which is even more depleted than it was before? A lot of questions, but a lot of games to play with the Lakers, so we'll see a little bit more from that. In terms of Jimmy Butler, the Warriors have had a couple of games with Jimmy Butler. They're 2-0 since trading for him. He's combined for 45 points in his first two games as a Warrior. What have you thought about his fit in Golden State?
Everything you wanted it to be for them. They were desperate for somebody who could take the pressure off Stephen Curry as a creator, but it had to be somebody who fits in the read and react system that they want to run. That's where the Dennis Schroeder acquisition never quite got there. He is much more of a traditional run a set, run a pick and roll type point guard, where when you had Jimmy Butler as a secondary guy, again, super high basketball IQ, super smart player, knows where to be, knows how to play off guys. I think too, the way he's taken a ton of free throws in these first couple games too. So I think the fact that he is now creating something out of nothing at times for them, I think for Steve Kerr, you're going to see probably some pretty extreme staggering where it's always one of Curry or Butler on the floor when they both are playing, because then he knows, all right, somebody can get me something out of this. If all else fails, like we're going to generate either a good shot from Steph or we'll generate, Jimmy Butler getting downhill. He's doing well setting the ball up for guys, finding shooters when he drives, all the stuff you wanted it to be. And he's holding up defensively too, that's again, at his age, it's not always there every single possession, but I think more often than not, he can kind of bring it. So they're going to be fun to watch now. Just watching them last night felt a lot more comfortable with that team than, oh no, Steph's been double teamed or Steph's off the floor. This is going to turn into garbage.
Yeah.
Like it felt like, okay, all right, they're going to find something out of it.
Yeah, they made that fourth quarter run at the beginning there with Steph Curry on the bench, Jimmy Butler in the game, and they made their run. And that was kind of the pocket of the game where they won the game against Milwaukee. And then Steph came in, and then they ended up just kind of sealing the deal there. And that was because Jimmy Butler was running the offense, ball was in his hands, getting to the free throw line a ton, and then also creating those steals. This is also something that the Warriors have not done in a really long time, turning defense into offense. They've always just sort of been like, let's try our best defensively, get the defensive rebound, and then hope Steph does something on offense. And that was sort of their game plan. And maybe somebody like Buddy Hield gets hot once a week or something like that. Where now Jimmy Butler is able to grab those steals, and eventually they're going to get to the point where he knows where Steph is going to be on the break. He knows where Draymond is going to be backdoor, perhaps, and all his other teammates. Still kind of clunky, also very understandable. There was one possession, I think it was in the first quarter, where Draymond has the ball, and Jimmy's they're both kind of going down the left side of the court, and Jimmy's kind of going into his sweet spot in the post, getting ready to be like, get the post entry pass. And Draymond, who's always played with dribble handoff guys, basically, is just waiting for Jimmy to kind of come up and go get the dribble handoff, and they just sort of run into each other, and Draymond just kind of hands it off to Jimmy Butler, and I forget what happened after that. But you've noticed that, and then also what I'm really interested to watch is how guys like Moses Moody, Quentin Post, like just whatever, all these role players react to Jimmy Butler, because they're used to playing off of Steph, and off of Steph you cut, right? You're always cutting. You're going to the basket because Steph has that perimeter gravity. Jimmy's the opposite. When Jimmy has the ball, he's going to go in, and you're going to have to push up. You're going to have to lift. And there was also a couple times where I thought the role players were just sort of like, wait, that's right. I'm not cutting. I'm going up when Jimmy has the ball in his hands. So it'll obviously work, and there's going to be a learning curve here, but it's just something interesting that I was watching. And it was kind of funny to watch it all kind of play out against Milwaukee, who was playing without Giannis, by the way.
Sure. Yeah. And there was a play was it the Bulls? I think they played in the first game together. Same kind of type of thing. Draymond was bringing it up. It wasn't transition like a fast break, but it was in transition. He brought the ball up. Steph did the whole, went out wide on the left, was going to come all the way around on the right side for one of his shots. And Jimmy went right to that block on the right hand side of the floor where he likes to operate from, and like he literally went right to the block and right into Steph's path, and like they bumped into each other, and you could see Draymond kind of held it, he balled it for a second, and then they reset, and I don't remember how the possession ended, but it's those little things. You're absolutely right. That's it, and I think it's always interesting too with fans. There's no practice time. Like trade deadline happens right in the midst of a million games going on. It's always a weird schedule at this time of year because you've got teams you're loading up to go into the All-Star break and all that stuff. So you end up in this weird place where often you see it look very messy until you get to the All-Star break. Then coming out of the All-Star break, it's almost like a mini camp where you can get in the gym for a couple days ahead of restarting play, and that's where you see it start to pick back up. So any of this early bumpiness, I think they'll iron it out here pretty quickly. But yeah, they're going to be fun to watch.
Yeah, I think it's actually looked better than I thought it was going to look, given everything. We're kind of making fun of them because it's kind of funny, but yeah, they look good. There was another point in that game too where Milwaukee went to a zone in the second half, and they just gave it to Jimmy Butler right in that mid-post area, that sweet spot that you already talked about, and he just busted the zone 2 possessions in a row. The first one had Bobby Portis on him, just got to his spot, shot it over Bobby Portis, and then the next one, Bobby Portis presses up on him, and then Draymond cuts back door, and you're like, oh, okay, that's what this is going to look like. Like this is pretty good for Golden State. The staggering, I think, is going to be really interesting because when you do stagger Steph and Butler, you're gonna they end up with a lot of minutes with Jimmy and Draymond on the court, which isn't the best fit. So that'll be kind of interesting to see how they iron that out. I kind of want to see a lot more of Jimmy and Steph together because that's like, Jimmy was talking about this the other day, like the opposites attract where everybody's going to be falling. But I also understand that you have to have somebody as the fulcrum of your offense on the court at all times. So it'll be interesting to see how Steve Kerr manages these rotations because there's still some things to figure out here. Quentin Post looks like he's sort of stapled to Jimmy Butler at least for right now, and I think that's kind of a good fit there too.
Yeah.
Let's talk to Aaron Fox in San Antonio. He's got the most games. I think it's 4 so far since he got traded to San Antonio. Him and Wembanyama combined for more than 60 points in the Spurs win over the Wizards on Monday night. Thoughts on that pairing?
Yeah, I like that they didn't just immediately bring Fox in and do the whole, all right, we're going to do a game of him and Chris Paul. Now Chris Paul's the backup. I like that they're kind of saying, hey, we're going to play the two of them together, at least to open games. They looks like Mitch Johnson is settling into a semi-early sub pattern where he's going to get one of them off the court. It's going to probably be Chris Paul. Then he's going to get into a little bit bigger of a lineup, and then Chris Paul will come back in really to kind of run and control that second unit. But it's working out pretty good. Fox isn't hitting his threes yet in San Antonio. That'll come with time. You can see him and Wembanyama kind of figuring out the two-man action, and that's important to note. I mean, we're coming off of, 3-ish years together with Sabonis, where that was one of the best two-man games in the league. And it's just Wembanyama for all his talents. He's not where Sabonis is as a passer or screener or any of that stuff. So that'll all get figured out. But, so far so good. You can kind of see it. I like when Fox gets it and he's like, let's go. And like, you're going to see that, I think, more when we come out of the All-Star break of he's going to really be kind of, no, we need to play at this pace. Let's really get up and down the floor. Let's run, because that's maybe Wembanyama's best skill amongst a whole ton of them is he's extremely quick. So like between that and his long strides, it's like 5 steps and he's from rim to rim. And if you're Fox, you're going to want to take advantage of that. Let's get down there before defenses can get set. We've seen a little bit of that. So, so far so good. I'm excited again to watch those two guys grow together and really to see how the Spurs put in all the other players around those two. Because, they're going to be the cornerstones. Everything else is going to, orbit around them.
Yeah, and even Wembanyama as the trailer on the fast break too is just going to be. He hit 4 3-pointers against the Wizards and I was listening to the Wizards broadcast and they were like falling out of their chairs. They're like, "Oh my god!"
Yeah,
I was like, "Yeah, dude, haven't you seen this guy?" So the thing I really like about, I'm with you. I love that they kept Chris Paul in the starting lineup. That was my biggest fear when they made the trade. I was like, Chris Paul's kind of awesome for this Spurs team, and he's really the guy that Victor Wembanyama needed after his rookie year. I love that they kept him in there. De'Aaron Fox has been in the league for a long time, all NBA, all-star kind of guy. Never has played with a veteran like Chris Paul. He is going to get like an extra graduate degree in point guarding by being around Chris Paul here. And I love that they're using Fox as a shooting guard. They're just like, look, we can sacrifice some size in the backcourt because we have the biggest human on the planet as our center, and it's okay. And I like that Fox has just sort of embraced it. He's like, all right, I'm the 2 guard. I'm going to be a scoring guard over here. And then obviously when Chris Paul comes out, I'll do some of my two-man game stuff, and we'll kind of explore the studio space in terms of what we can do together. But I also like how deferential De'Aaron Fox is being too. He picked San Antonio because he obviously wanted to play for Victor Wembanyama, unless he's like a big Riverwalk guy. But I think it was because of Wembanyama. And he's like, yeah, I'm the number 2 to this guy. And I think that's really cool that he's sort of embraced that. And you could tell he's doing it because Wembanyama's kind of going off in that first quarter of that Wizards game. And De'Aaron Fox is like, all right, cool. I'll get to the foul line a little bit here. I'll kind of do my things here. And then in the fourth quarter, I thought they really started to lean into that 2-man game. So I don't know. It's such an intriguing fit there for so many different reasons. And I'm kind of excited to see it. And you mentioned like Fox and Sabonis was such a natural point guard pick and roll center duo in almost every single way. It was throwback, where that's not the case with Victor Wembanyama. So Fox figuring out how this is going to operate and having Chris Paul to help him do it. I think like just seeing the beginning of this is obviously very productive, but it's not where it's going to be, obviously.
Yeah, absolutely. I think also having Chris Paul out there keeps you from getting too Wemby Fox focused.
Yeah.
Where those two guys' natural inclination is going to be, let's try to make this work with each other. They played Orlando the other night. Orlando ended up winning the game. But one of the really cool things that happened early was Harrison Barnes was ridiculously hot. And Chris Paul was the one who was like, no, you need to keep feeding him. He's the one who has it going. Let's keep getting him the ball. they went away from it after the first quarter or so, but that was at least initially like that's the guy, right? And Chris Paul's going to do that. They've had plays in each of these games where Devin Vassell goes like
Yep.
5-6 possessions in a row without a touch, and then it's Chris Paul who's like, hey, we're going to run something to get Devin Vassell a touch because he's so smart, right? He's going to make sure we got to keep everybody engaged here. We it can't be the two of you and occasionally me. We got to get all these other guys touches, keep them involved, keep them engaged in the game. And that's why, again, you don't go away from Chris Paul. That was also when the trade happened. Everybody was, where's Chris Paul going to go, right? He's going to get bought out. Is he going back to Sacramento? When they made it clear he wasn't going to be in the trade because they were going to match salary in other ways, it was like, okay, all right, well then Chris Paul's not going anywhere. Like they're not just going to buy him out. Not with how well it's gone, how happy he is. He's made this work. He's good with that. And now if you're the Spurs too, you could kind of go into the summer if it's like, Chris Paul would like to maybe go back home and finish it out closer to home. You kind of say, all right, man, thanks for everything you did in this transitional year for us, and good luck with what you do in your final as your career winds down here. But Chris Paul's playing great this year. Like I don't these guys where I'm like, well, this is done. This guy's wrapping up. I'm like, I don't know, maybe they're all going to play 4 or 5 more years and just still be going into their mid to late 40s.
I mean, just the quarterbacking that Chris Paul does, like that is so valuable. It's such a great point that you made. It's because you get young guys like Fox and Wembanyama, they might just feel like, okay, this is our team. Let's do this. It's up to everybody else to figure it out around us, or maybe not even like that conscious. It's just like, hey, we're the stars. Let's kind of just do our thing here. Chris Paul being able to get everybody to eat is such an important part because Devin Vassell is a good player, right? Like they have some interesting young guys. They have a Sohan that they want to still kind of explore what this guy is. And having Chris Paul out there to make sure that everybody gets some opportunity is going to be hugely important as this team builds. I kind of hope that they keep him around. Let him hang out, man. Like, why not? But we'll see. They're a really interesting team to see what they do in the offseason. So we can transition here to some offseason talk here. So bunch of activity before the trade deadline. I think a lot of it is going to impact the upcoming offseason. You're the perfect guy to have on the show to talk about this. I want to start with San Antonio before we get to some of the other teams because we're already there. It'll be interesting to see what they do. I was on the fence about them kind of making a big move like a De'Aaron Fox trade. And then you saw what they gave up and you're like, well, how do you not do that? It would have malpractice to not trade a couple of picks and 2 role players for De'Aaron Fox. So they go ahead and do that. And now that they've done that, I'm at the point where I'm like, nah, just go all in. Just do it. Because you could argue Victor Wembanyama has the best contract in the NBA. Right? He's making $12 million a year, whatever it is. He's one of the best 10, 15 players in the league already. If you think that this guy is ready to be a core part, he doesn't necessarily have to carry a championship team, but if you think he's ready to be a core part of a championship team, you can afford to, and now you've got De'Aaron Fox, you can afford to overspend maybe in another area. And if you're San Antonio, you've got a bunch of interesting players still on the roster, draft picks. Like, I'm looking around. Kevin Durant is being talked about a lot in terms of what his offseason looks like, and is he going to eventually ask for a trade? And if I'm San Antonio, I look at something like that, and I'm like, maybe that's something I do here. And it doesn't necessarily have to be Kevin Durant, but can you do let's just go for it right now while Wemby's on this rookie scale contract, and we've got this cost control here. Maybe there's an opportunity to go and really compete for something early on that doesn't necessarily cost us the future, because obviously the future is Victor Wembanyama anyway. Yeah,
and that's the best part of that, right? It's Wembanyama's the future, but he's also really good right now. And there's no reason why you need to wait 3 more years to load up. You could do it today. I mean, not today. Now we're behind the trade deadline, but you could do it, this summer and go really load up this roster. And instead of having, all right, Wemby's in year 5 and we're really figuring it out, could be we did it in year 3 and we bought a couple more years, of really going for contention. And I think there's this obsession among NBA fans. I never see this in any other sport of got to match the timeline, got to match the timeline, got to match the timeline. And here's the thing. If you get everybody on the exact same timeline, you can't pay everybody anyway. If they all pop, they're all going to come due for new contracts right around within the same 2 to 3 year window. And then you're going to end up having to move guys out. And then the other thing is, what do we do with every young team? when it's like, all right, they competed for the playoffs, so they made it in, they got bounced. Let's go get him a vet now to really help them in the play.
Right.
We'll just do it now, right? You know how good Wemby is. He was, he's played in big games already in his career. They just happen to come outside of the NBA. There's no reason to think he's not going to hold up in big games in the NBA. And if there were holes in his game, I'd rather know about him a little earlier and really start working on him so that it is by the time we are into year 5, 6, 7, it's like, oh man, now this dude is the unstoppable monster. And it almost doesn't matter who we put around him because he got that early experience, in playing meaningful games. I think the Spurs are on a good path. It is this year we'll be more competitive. We're going to play meaningful basketball, probably at the way they're looking in the standings, probably till about the middle of March or so.
Mm-hmm.
And then it'll be all right. We're going to slide out and it's, wherever our pick falls, it falls. But I think that's important. And then I think it's next year is going to be now we really want to push. And I don't know that I think they're going to skip a step, which is an okay step to skip, which is we don't really need to be a play-in team, first round exit. Let's skip that and let's try to make the second round and maybe beyond if things fall our way, matchup and luck wise. And I think that's the best way to do it. I'm really excited to see how they put that together. And lastly, to your point, they have the ability to do it. You can move a whole bunch of guys who are on pretty good contracts that could really get you stuff. And they didn't give up any of their best picks in this trade to get De'Aaron Fox. That Minnesota pick was pretty juicy because we don't know what the Wolves will be by then. But they still have all the rest of their best picks. So it's really going to be in a position where it is, all right, this guy is happy to come here, wants to be here. Let's go get him. Let's go. And I'm okay if that's an older veteran guy because here's the thing. If that guy ages out in 2 years, just repeat the process and go do it all over again because you're going to have Wembanyama for the next decade plus of, terrific ball unless you get weird and pull a Luka on him, which I don't think they're going to do.
And if that player ages out and maybe retires or just ages off of his contract and isn't the right fit anymore, and then Victor Wembanyama gets his supermax deal, and now you kind of are playing more with this timeline. And it's such a great point. We're so obsessed with timeline instead of talent, and like Victor Wembanyama has the talent right now to go ahead and do it. He reminds me of like a musician who's playing like small venues, and they're just crushing every small venue, and eventually you're like, can this dude sell out a stadium? And what does that look like? Because it's different to play a stadium than it is a small venue, and that takes an adjustment period. I want Victor Wembanyama playing stadiums. I want him out there. I want him exploring the stage. I want him to figure out how to do it because the playoffs, as we know, are so different than the regular season. And this guy's crushing it in the regular season. We know he could play it in the regular season. Take the training wheels off, get him that experience. And with this De'Aaron Fox trade, I think we're going to see him in at least the play-in tournament here. We'll see what ultimately happens, but let's get him. Let's put him in the pressure cooker. Let's get him in the big stadium. Yeah. Let's get him under the brightest of the lights and see what's what. There's numerous examples of this happening in sports. I think about the Heat trading for Shaq after Dwayne Wade's rookie year. They go to the playoffs and are like, let's just do this. Shaq's out there. Let's go ahead and do it. And those weren't Dwayne Wade's best years, but they won a championship in 2006. It didn't stop him from becoming one of the best players in the league and ultimately being the guy that LeBron wanted to team up with. It doesn't stall out your development. And if anything, I think it moves it forward. It kicks it forward a little bit. Patrick Mahomes in the NFL, like he was a rookie with Tyreek Hill, Travis Kelce, like all NFL players on his roster. And they're like, yeah, they weren't obsessed with trying to find a receiver that was Patrick Mahomes' age. They were like, let's just go get the guys that are good so you could throw to them. And I do think that when you have we've seen it in the NFL where you have these guys on rookie contracts, the quarterbacks, and they just surround them with talent because they think this guy could just complete enough passes for us. If we have a good enough defense and good enough targets, we could probably win a championship with this guy. We don't really see that in the NBA, and I wonder now with the second apron stuff and all this stuff, maybe that becomes more of a. Now you're not always going to get a Victor Wembanyama in NBA, but if you're lucky enough to get a guy who's generational like that could be one of even just a starter on a championship level team on a rookie scale contract. I wonder if they start kind of looking at it a little bit different instead of, hey, we have plenty of time, and maybe the thinking goes, we're kind of on the clock already because we don't have that much time because we're going to have to pay this guy in 4 years. So let's go ahead and try to get this thing going right now while we still have this guy on a bargain contract.
Yeah, I'm a big believer in the idea of, and it's the hardest thing to do for a front office is to know when to go because if you wait too long, your window may never really open. And then the next thing you know, you've missed it and it's gone. If you go too early, then you've cashed in and your window never actually got open on that end of it. So that's the hard thing to know is like when to go. But if you time it right, NBA windows are generally going to be about a 3 to 4 year window because that's the nature of NBA contracts. The vast majority are 3 to 4 year contracts. So I think what's really important is if you got the right guys, and again, Wembanyama is that kind of guy, your 3 to 4 year window could very easily be an 8 to 10 year window because you blew that thing open. And that's where you're going to be really smart, with this, the way you do it. I like the Wizards should not be going all in, right? Like that's
Right.
They're so early on. They don't have the guy yet. They're just starting this process. But yeah, if you're the Spurs, you already have your guy. You can feel confident in accelerating this process a little bit because now we've seen what it looks like.
And because of how versatile Wembanyama is, you can kind of just go in any direction, really. I mean, with De'Aaron Fox, you don't want like a scoring guard necessarily, but you can kind of go in a lot of different directions. You could, I don't think I would do it, but you could go get a big man and make him the guy if you want to.
Yep.
Obviously, I think the biggest need there would be wing. Could you upgrade from Devin Vassell? Like that's why the name I keep bringing it up, Kevin Durant at 35, going to be 36 years old. Is that would be really interesting to me if I were San Antonio. But there's other names out there. I mean, who knows who these players could be? But the other thing with San Antonio is you're not beholden to the guys who are on the market. You have so much stuff that you could trade that you could propose something that nobody else can refuse. You could kind of just not necessarily just pick your guy and grab him because the other team has to say yes, but you could pick your guy and give him and offer a pretty juicy package to whoever it is that you're trying to target. But we mentioned Kevin Durant there. Let's talk about some other teams that we're watching closely after what they did at the deadline, or in Phoenix's case, what they did not do at the deadline. The reports are out there, Keith. Everybody knows what's up going on in Phoenix. I know Kevin Durant talked about this with the media. He did a really nice job the other night talking about how he's going to return his focus to the Phoenix Suns. The trade deadline is over. He's committed to winning right now. But we know how this stuff works. All eyes are going to be on KD this summer. What do you think's going on in Phoenix?
Yeah, I think this is a realization for the Suns that this current group doesn't work and we needed to do something different. And they tried. They didn't get there ultimately, but I think they are going to go into the summer. Them and Kevin Durant are going to come to it. This is over. Now, that could change. Maybe they have an incredible playoff run and it's like, hey, let's just keep going. The playoffs have a way of changing a lot of things. But I really feel like Kevin Durant, throughout his career since leaving the Thunder, he gets somewhere in a few years in, he gets itchy feet. He's like, I'm ready to go. Like, I'm ready to move again. Like, I want to see what life is like somewhere else. And I think that's where we're at. He's been with the Suns now for a little bit, and it's, all right, this is okay, but I'm ready to go. I'm ready to try somewhere different. And that's where for him, he's also a pretty smart guy where I think he looks at it and says, there's no real way to make this team that much better, unless we can find the miracle Bradley Beal trade, and we didn't. So,
right.
Why would I think that? So, yeah, I do think they're going to move him. I think they're going to move him in the kind of move where it's instead of Jimmy Butler coming back and you get in another third max guy and you just kind of go. I think now you're going to see the Suns say, hey, we got to break KD's $50 million contract up into 2, 3, 4 guys who can play and really rebuild our depth. We'll retool around Devin Booker. Bradley Beal, we're just going to have to wait it out. Like it is what it is. But Bradley Beal, if we could tell him, hey, you're in this 25-minute a night bench role, just go be great. Go win 6th man of the year. Go do that. Then, all right, we're working. But I think they're going to pivot and start to really rebuild heavily around Booker. I don't buy the whole Devin Booker could move to stuff because I don't think they're built to rebuild that way. Again, caveat everything now with Luka Doncic is a Laker, so who knows? But yeah, I do think they're going to be they would be number 1 on my team to watch list just because we got major changes coming in Phoenix.
Moving on from Durant just seems really obvious because not only does he look around and say that obviously it's not working out in Phoenix, he's up for a contract extension this summer. He's not signing that thing. He'd be crazy. And so if you're the Suns at that point, do you even wait for him to request the trade, or do you say, well, we can't let this guy walk away for nothing because we already have nothing.
Yeah.
We can't afford for this to get nothing for this guy. So they might put him in trade rumors again after they just did it before the trade deadline, which would make more sense this summer than it did, 2 weeks ago. But here we are. And if you're KD also, I think you do have a little bit of leverage in where it is that you want to go. Just like we saw De'Aaron Fox choose his spot. I want San Antonio. I'm going to be a free agent in 2026. I'm not signing anywhere. I'm going to San Antonio. And they stole him, right? Like they got him on the cheap because of De'Aaron Fox being able to wield a little bit of his leverage there. And I think Kevin Durant is going to be in position to do the same thing. So I look at the teams. I mean, we know that the Timberwolves made those calls. That's kind of interesting. Kevin Durant with Anthony Edwards. We know that their relationship, what that is. Memphis was involved, right? Miami was making calls. The Golden State thing seems like that's probably done, even though he said, like, now's not the right time. And I was like, I don't know if any time is going to be the right time for Kevin Durant and Golden State. So any other teams that you're thinking of or one of those teams pop out?
Yeah, there's like a kind of world where I always think about, could the Thunder just bring him home and say, hey, just come home. Let's finish this thing out the way we started it together. Let's go. Like I always do wonder about that. I don't think that's how it'll go because I don't think OKC is going to want to cash in their chips that way. We kind of talked. Could the Spurs say, you know what, let's go get him, and we'll run. With this as our group for at least the next few seasons, and that's how we'll play it out. But yeah, I mean, if Kevin Durant, Mavericks too, they were mentioned as another team.
Yep.
They all those guys apparently wanted to play together in Boston at one time, which was weird because we heard nothing from them, but no, none of us want to be in Boston. So weird, with that. But yeah, if he becomes available outside of we'll take Brooklyn out of the mix, the bad team. Some people have said though, he loves the idea of going home, like home, which is Washington, to play for the Wizards someday. Like people have mentioned that, countless times where he's always said that. Maybe he is like, hey, I can go there and this is how I'll finish, with my hometown team. I kind of don't think so because I think he would rather win.
Yeah.
But Kevin Durant makes decisions for Kevin Durant, and that's the best way I can put that. And I don't pretend to try to guess what he's going to want or do.
Yeah, I mean, we got the report from Brian Windhorst and Ramona Shelburne that he would have been open to trading from Miami, to Miami, as opposed to getting traded to Golden State. So we know one thing he doesn't want is he's not going back to Golden State.
Yeah.
Being open to getting traded to Miami and then pushing for a trade to Miami, two very different things. Correct. But it does, if Miami or otherwise, he is in a position to call his spot, and there's still so many teams that it feels like, I mean, you just listed them. Kevin Durant on any of those teams, except for the Wizards, really, would be awesome. Like, he would be awesome in Minnesota. He would be awesome in Miami, right? He would be awesome in any of those. He would be great in Memphis. I really hope it's not the Wizards. And the other part about the Suns, too, is all right, let's say they trade Durant and they get, like you said, I think that's perfect. 3 or 4 role players. We split that contract up. And then Houston calls, and they're like, all your picks back plus whatever, Jalen Green for Devin Booker. I do wonder if they would just be like, we already pulled, like, Matt Ishbia clearly is all in one way or the other, right? And I just wonder if he would just look around and be like, nah, let's screw it. Let's just go all in on this rebuild. We'll hold on to Bradley Beal, obviously, because we kind of have to for a couple of years. But Booker, we get our picks back. We get a nice young player in Jalen Green. We've split up the Kevin Durant. I don't know. I'm not ruling anything out anymore with Phoenix, and I don't think anybody should.
Yeah, I'm with you on that one, too. That's where, if you're the front office of the Suns, you have to be, your conversation with Matt Ishbia has to be, if we do this, we have to see it through. We can't get impatient a year into rebuilding and then let's trade all the picks again. Let's go get guys. Like, basically at that point, my conversation would be, all right, if we're doing this, we have to ride Beal's contract out. We're not paying to get off the deal. We ride it out for the next 2 years. We are going to be awful. Like, we're probably going to be one of the worst teams in the league. And you have to be okay with that for a couple of years. And then we'll start to build back up. We've got draft capital. We'll have, rebuilt through another team's draft, hopefully. And we'll kind of start to figure our stuff out there, because that's the tough thing. I mean, they're not in a position where just selling off guys puts it in, well, we'll just tank, because they're going to have to outsource it to another team because they don't have control of any of their picks for the next, all the way through, until we get to when the league year flips over and we get to 2032. They're all their picks are controlled by other teams. So that's where you're going to be very careful. But at some point, you also have to look at it and be like, we can't cry over spilled milk. Like those are gone. We're not getting them back. Let's start over here now and do it this way. So yeah, I'm with you. I'm not going to rule anything out with them either.
Last thing on Kevin Durant, when he has moved, every time he's moved, he's gone to a team that looks like they're a Kevin Durant away, right? Whether it was Oklahoma City, Golden State, he was able to they were able to sell it after losing the finals. We're Kevin Durant away, and then he goes from there to Brooklyn, and he has the whole thing with Kyrie Irving. And Brooklyn had done the thing that you just talked about, outsourced the rebuilding part of their draft and all that kind of stuff. Built something kind of nice there with Kenny Atkinson and everything going on. He's like, me and Kyrie can go there and transform that team, and that didn't obviously work out, but that was at least the thought process. When Kyrie got traded to Dallas, and then he was looking around, he looked at Phoenix and he was like, they were in the finals a couple years ago. Yep. We can make that happen. And he goes there too. And so what's the team that is a Kevin Durant away? I think there's I think we already named the teams, and I think all those make a whole lot of sense. What's another team that you're watching extra closely after what they did at the deadline?
New Orleans. I am really curious with the Pelicans where what comes next, right? They are now, they've moved on from the Brandon Ingram situation. I think they've now given themselves a huge amount of flexibility that did not exist previously. It's not that they're going to be a cap space team or anything like that, but what their flexibility is, if they win the lottery and they get Cooper Flag, they have the flexibility to say, we're without DeJounte Murray for half a year. Cooper Flag, as good as he is going to take some time. Let's trade Zion. Let's move some other guys, and we'll just rebuild. We're basically starting over. Mm-hmm. And this time around, when they won the Zion lottery, they tried to shortcut it, right? And that's been every move since then has been, let's go get this guy. Let's go get this guy. Let's go get this guy to try to, let's put ourselves into contention as quick as we can around Zion. And I think now you're in the position where if we get Cooper Flag, let's just start over, right? Let's just completely start over. You know, we've got the guy now. We know who our franchise guy is going to be, but let's start over. If you don't win that, then you're in a position to, I don't know, let's say they land around the 4th pick or something. Then it could be, all right, we're going to shop this for help right now. And we're going to have Zion. We're going to have CJ McCollum. Maybe we move him in the deal, but we're going to have guys that we can build around and kind of go, through with this. So we'll see, kind of how that all comes together with all of this. So I think it's going to be a, really interesting thing with them to see kind of how this all David Griffin pieces it together. And I think the lottery is going to be the first domino to fall in all of that.
That's a really good way to put it, right? Because if you get the next top guy, then you don't really have it. You probably almost have to move on from Zion, right? If you end up with Cooper Flag, everybody, the people that are way better at the draft scouting stuff than I am say, like, this is a guy that can kind of fit anywhere, but you still want to kind of get your whole thing reset on a Cooper Flag timeline and give him the space to grow and all that stuff. And it's tough to see where Zion would fit in on that. I also have a really hard time. I know that everybody's like, Zion. It would be really kind of selling low on Zion at this point. And I just still have such a hard time kind of coming to grips with that if I were the Pelicans. But that becomes a lot easier if you end up with Cooper Flag in the draft versus if you end up still in a good draft with, a top 5 pick as opposed to the first overall pick. Are you as willing to do it anymore? And so we might know on lottery night, when the results of the lottery are revealed, maybe what the Pelicans' most likely path is. And then if they do end up shopping Zion, that's another fascinating kind of piece here is what's the right team for Zion? We just named half a dozen teams that could be the right fit for Durant. That list is a lot shorter for Zion. Is that a team where if you're the Wizards, you're just like, I don't know, here's like Keyshawn George and some other stuff, and we'll take a flyer on Zion. If you're Chicago, it's like we don't really have our guy. We'll take a flyer on Zion. We'll put him in the Chicago market, see what happens. I have no idea where Zion would end up.
Yeah, I think a lot about, again, like, if I'm the Thunder, am I like, let's try it? Because if it works, good luck stopping us ever. Mm-hmm. And if it doesn't, all right, we'll waive them and get out of the business later, and we'll, repivot around whatever we got. Because it's not going to you can send a draft pick and matching salary package back without having to touch a single core player.
Right.
There because they can plus up the offer in other ways that other teams can't. San Antonio is another one for him. What if you said, all right, we'll figure it out? Because the nature of his contract is you give it a shot. And if you're a year in and you're like, man, this failed and this guy is he's never going to play more than 40 or 50 games. And you're like, all right, we went out of this business, just waive him. And yeah, you're out, whatever, you're traded, but you kind of, hey, we gave it a shot. We really tried, with this. And yeah, you're right. Any rebuilding team, because that's a very easy way to sell. Hey, we're trying something different, right? With that. But yeah, the Pelicans are going to be a lot of fun to watch. And the lottery is really going to drive, I think, a lot of their decision making because of where they're at, with their structure of the roster and the guys who are currently on it.
What's another team that you're looking at here?
Yeah, I'll flip over to the East. I'm going to go with Orlando here because they didn't do anything at the trade deadline. They were one of the few teams that fully sat out the deadline and did nothing. So I think we're going to really see them have to do something this summer. Unless Jalen Suggs gets back and that team takes off and all of a sudden it's like, man, all we really did need to do was get healthy. I don't think that's the case. They're going to have to do something to get better because I get it. They're going to be expensive. You got Wagner and Suggs contract extensions both coming online. You're going to have Paolo's going to sign a max extension this summer. So you're going to have 3 max guys here within a couple years, or Suggs will be close as he's got kind of one of those reverse contracts that declines year to year. But you're going to be really expensive. But you are also in a position where you're pretty good and you can't shoot. You can't shoot. Can't put enough points on the board. Offense is extremely hard for them to come by. Nothing comes easy. You're going to have to do something. And they've got a whole bunch of tradable contracts where it'd be, all right, who became available that we could go look at that's a fit between Paolo and Franz? Great, let's get in on that guy. And I think that's going to be really important for them. Feels like they were hopeful of let's get healthy and let this playoffs really show us what we need. Where, in my opinion, you learned last year what it was. But let's see where they go from here.
Yeah, the injuries to Paolo and Franz really felt like it derailed what the season was supposed to be, which was a laboratory stress test. Like, let's figure it out, give them one more year. What did they learn from the playoffs last year that they could apply to this year? And what's the growth? Is there a Jason Tatum level leap in Paolo or Franz where they can become a primary playmaker? Or do we not think that that's the case? We have a year to kind of figure it out, and you lose half a year for both of those guys to figure it out. Now, who knows what the rest of the season looks like for them? The weird part for the Magic is, the names that have been out there, like whether it's like a Malik Monk or like an Anthony Simons, I'm like, I wouldn't, like, what's even the point of that? Like, those are good players. To me, if you've decided that Franz or Paolo are not going to be your lead playmaker, then you got to go out and get a lead playmaker. And those guys aren't lead playmakers. To me, if those guys are going to defer to somebody, you got to go get somebody that's at least at their level, if not better. And that's a hard player to find because Paolo and Franz are awesome. So it's, where do you end up there? Because if you end up just getting an Anthony Simons, just to use his name again, are they really going to defer to this guy? No. He can space the floor. Yeah. He can help. But what it's going to cost to go get that guy and then what you have to pay him, I don't know that it's going to be worth it. Like, you might as well just be like, I don't know, maybe Jet Howard finally pops. It's like, you might as well just kind of do it that way or find a smaller version of another version of that. So that's the part with Orlando that I can't quite figure out is, yes, they need a guy. Who is that guy? And then what's it going to cost to get that guy? Because if I'm Orlando, I'm like, Paolo's untouchable, Franz is untouchable, Jalen Suggs to me is untouchable. Everybody else we could talk about, but those 3 guys are the core. And finding a guy who can add to that core, that's tough. And it's not like Orlando's a free agent market either. So that's the other part of this too.
Yeah, I think your challenge for the Magic is they're a perfect example of, if you wait too long on your window, it maybe never comes open. Right. And I don't want to see them where, like, in year 5 and 6 of Paolo and Franz, and it's like, oh no, like we never got there, right? Like now we've got these 2 guys that are on these big contracts. Suggs is on a big deal too, and now it's too hard to go get that guy, and it's going to be really difficult, or we're going to have to really commit to going into the tax. I will say this. We don't know this for certain, because the former owner passed away and now his kids are running the team. But the Magic had not been tax averse in the past. When they had good teams with Dwight Howard and they made the finals and they were in the mix year over year, they paid the tax. They were never Phoenix levels of into the tax, but nobody's really ever been that level in. But they would pay the tax. So it's not, I would not immediately rule out like, well, they're never going to pay the tax. So, that's going to put a cap on where they'll go. But yeah, it's really tough. And that's to your point about deferring too. They want guys who fit with Paolo and Franz and aren't. That's why, like, when people are like, why didn't they go get De'Aaron Fox if that's what the price was? I don't think they really, it's not that they didn't want De'Aaron Fox. I'm sure there was a price that would have loved to have had him. But for what they would have had to pay direct, that's not the guy they want. They want guys who are not going to take the ball out of Paolo and Franz's hands. They want a kind of caretaker type point guard who's going to be like a Mike Conley type, who's going to come down, set the offense, drift around the perimeter, knock down open shots when it comes his way, and not complain about that. Like, that's what they need. The problem is those guys are so few and far between, and most of them are 10 years or later in their career because they've kind of figured that out of, all right, this is what I need to be, here. So that's going to be what's going to be interesting to watch with the Magic is how do they piece it together from, but it's going to start this summer because it's only going to get more difficult as we go.
Yeah, if they could get a Chris Paul or a Mike Conley, that's the obvious fit. But like you said, like you look around the league, and you're like, I don't know who these guys are.
Yeah.
And so that's why I kind of go the other way. I'm like, well, maybe you just go get an alpha and it's up to Paolo and Franz to go follow. So I got two names for you that I've been thinking about for them. The first one is Trae Young, which I used to hate that fit. But then after watching Trae Young in Atlanta this year, surrounded by size with Riz Shea and Johnson and all these guys, I'm like, when they're healthy, they kind of had it going, right? And Orlando is that plus some, right? They've got a lot more size and they're super jumbo all across the board. If any team can kind of cover up for Trae Young's deficiencies, it would be the Orlando Magic because they're so big. And I kind of like Trae Young this year a little bit more, doing the deferring and playing off the ball a little bit. Like, he's really leaned into it. I wonder what that would look like next to Franz and Paolo. Trae Young's pretty interesting to me. And then the other one is John Morant. Like, I'm not, like, nothing's off the table anymore. And I don't know what John Morant's future looks like in Memphis. Do they just say, you know what? The guy's just too injury prone, misses 20, 30 games a year. Jaren Jackson Jr. is an all NBA guy. We're just going to do this instead. And we're just not going to pay John Morant his next contract. Maybe we start quietly shopping him around. And that would be another guy that if I'm Orlando, yeah, the outside shooting is a problem, but boy, they would put so much pressure on the basket. And maybe they just triple down on that and say, we're just going to do this. And it worked for Memphis, and it could probably work for us. So those are two names that I'd be like, dream scenario. If I'm Orlando, I'm at least calling those teams and being like, what's it going to cost?
Yeah, I don't mind the Trae Young one for all the reasons you said. I think to his playmaking fits, like with a bunch of guys who are pretty good off ball movers, like that'd really fit. They could certainly protect for him, and he can shoot. So that's, right. For me, that's where that fit ends up working. John Morant it falls apart a little bit. I think also you have to be extremely cautious because, right, that's your, like, either one of those would be your all-in move, right? Because you're going to have to trade real stuff to go get those guys. And if you do that for John Morant, and then it turns into John Morant's going to play 50 games a year, right? Now you're like, well, that's not going to work, right? It's just not going to be there. So I would stray from that one only because of the injury concerns and the fact that his jump shot's so inconsistent. But yeah, I mean, we'll see. Yeah, I'm very curious to see where they go. My other team in the East, just because I'm going to throw them out there, just because they're the only team with cap space, is the Nets. There's no sense they're doing anything major, so this is a very quick one. But they're going to be involved in basically anything that happens because they're the only team now that projects to have cap space this summer, which is wild. Where we are in the league, and that'll probably change in maybe as soon as a year or two when we get into the summer of 26 and 27, when it looks like we may have actual real free agents available again. But for now, the Nets are going to be involved in just about anything that goes on. They're going to be, I know on Spotrac, when we flip the year over, they're going to be everybody's favorite team, to throw into 3-team trades because it's going to be, let's use the Nets. Let's use the Nets.
So if they get Cooper Flag, that's almost like what we were talking about with New Orleans before, where let's get Cooper Flag. We got some cap space. Let's surround him with some talent, and let's just see what this is. Maybe we can make the play-in the Eastern Conference. Who knows? And if I don't know, they might just end up being the team that just says we'll take your unwanted salary for draft picks, and maybe that's just all this is with the cap space. Especially if they're the only team with cap space. To your point, like they kind of control the market, right? They kind of corner the market in that Sam Prestiism kind of. We'll take your Paul Millsaps with draft picks if that's what you want us to do.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, that's it. That's what I always say is bring me, you're tired, you're hungry, you're poor, you're bad contract, just send them with a couple round picks, a couple second round picks, first, maybe a first round if it's really bad.
Right.
We're happy to make it work. I think there. And then I think the other thing for the Nets is I think it's going to be really important to let Sean Marks do what he does best. This is when he built that really good Nets team pre-Kyrie and KD. He's really good at, I call it the diamond mining process. He's already started it. Guys like Keon Johnson, Trendon Watford, Zaire Williams. None of those guys look like they're going to be superstars, but all of them look like, they could be pretty good players on a good team. When they're like your seventh best guys, we're in pretty good shape. Like we can really go forward. And, he does a really good job with finding those cast offs and guys who just, they need a second chance or they need a, fresh start somewhere. Just don't get impatient this time around. I don't care if, the next two guys come and say, hey, we really want to team up in Brooklyn. I know it's really hard, but you got to let Mark see it through. Like, then that's probably not how it'll go, right? If two other guys that we don't even know are like, hey, what we want to do is play for the Nets, moving forward, and you'll figure it out. Of course, you're going to be like, all right, let's bring in these 2-star level guys because that's what you do. But it's just going to be fun to watch them just kind of be involved on everything. Last thing I'll say too, last time they were in this situation, Sean Marks screwed up a whole lot of teams off seasons by throwing around offer sheets to restricted free agents. So that could be another thing we see. That could be a whole play there. Let's just this time around, if the teams match them, you don't need to trade for all of them a year later. Like we could probably let that skip that part.
You could skip the Tyler Johnson, Alan Crabb part of the rebuild.
We don't need to do that.
Keith Smith, Spotrac, the front office show. You could find that wherever you get podcasts and on YouTube. Thanks so much for jumping on, man. Always fun.
I appreciate it. Thanks so much for having me.